and welcome to BestinUC TV. I'm your host, Heather Clancy. And this month we're featuring topics about education. My guest today is Al Harnisch. He is the CEO of Eastern Datacomm, and he's in Hackensack, New Jersey with me here. And one of the things that we're going to discuss is how IP phones can really help administrate and cut costs for a school district, primarily K through 12, but we might get into some higher education examples as well. Al, thanks for letting me come here and interview you today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
The reason that I wanted to talk to you about this is I actually happen to be aware of a pretty high-profile account in my neighboring town where a school district used the technology to kind of unify their communications through different schools. I think there were 11 in all. And I guess that's the first topic that I really want to focus on here, which is how can an IP phone system really help unify a school district, kind of pull them together, I mean, as opposed to having them be islands unto themselves with different communication systems.
Right. So schools traditionally have either had very limited communications amongst themselves, or if they did have some kind of inter-school communications, it was typically either relatively complicated or relatively expensive.
Yeah.
So the benefit of an IP-based system or unified communication system is it can leverage the money that has already been spent and the networking that has already been done to support the data network. So most schools, most school districts, the buildings are already tied together using a data network, and voice over IP is really an application that sits on top of that data network and takes advantage of that infrastructure that's put in place. So typically what can happen is these schools can improve their communications by having a unified dialing plan, which is I can dial a 3 or 4 digit number and reach the person next to me or person in the school next door or across town, and at the same time they can remove that expensive or cumbersome voice-related network, because now they're going to do that over their data network. So they're saving money and they're improving communication.
So if it's an application on the network, how easy is this to install?
Well, that's the beauty of it. It's the installation portion, as far as integrating among buildings, becomes very, very easy. The system itself is fairly easy to install in terms of the geography, but it's far less complicated than what people used to have to do. I'll say the old days, but 5 or 10 years ago even, it's far less complicated than what used to take place. And even you mentioned colleges. So on college campuses, a lot of times they would have a very elaborate wiring structure strung from building to building. And there's hundreds of pairs of wires going from the main building where a very large traditional type of phone system might have been. And you have a couple hundred copper wires going to this building and that building, and then from that building to the next building. And to install a phone, somebody had to understand the wiring structure in the whole campus and be able to cross-connect wires from here to there to get a phone working, 3 building hops away. So with unified communications and voice over IP, that all goes away, because the buildings are all connected in a data network, and you're taking advantage of IP and just plugging the phone in. So
I'm picturing this, person in front of a switchboard, those operators that you used to see, right? And moving back and forth on chairs.
But we've had people who just couldn't get a phone working in a building because the guy who originally knew, or gal who used to know the wiring plan throughout the building, something got lost, the person retired. It's very complicated.
So are these in every classroom, these phones? I mean, does a phone go into the classroom? Can it be like I used to do the school announcements, right?
Right.
Have the intercom system.
Yeah.
Could they replace some of those applications as well if you have a speakerphone in an office? Or where are people? Where are they going? Is it mainly in the office, or is it in the
again, when we were young, you picked up the microphone in the office and talked into make a page. So nowadays, when we install a system, we interface the phone system with the paging system. So you can pick up a phone. You might have to dial a code to get into it, but then you can make your announcement from a telephone, which, by the way, allows you to make announcements if you have the proper authorization. You can make announcements from anywhere within a school in the event of emergency, for example, instead of it being in the office, right? Right.
So you could essentially address some security applications for the school safety applications as well.
And you mentioned phones in classrooms. So you could put phones in classrooms, and the voice can come out of the phone, or the voice can come out of the existing paging system in the classroom, right?
Okay.
And we had one school where they had a situation. In fact, the way it was cost justified was they had a police situation where somebody came into town with a gun. There was a robbery in a neighboring town. They came into this town with a gun. They went toward the school, so the police called the school and suggested a lockdown. So they locked the school down. The school at the time didn't have any phones in the classroom. So the teachers closed the shades, turned the lights off, the kids hunkered down under the desks, and they were there for like 5 hours without any information about whether this armed robber was actually on the grounds or whether they had left. Meanwhile, the guy drove through the town. It was 5 towns away, and nobody was able to communicate to the teachers. So the kids got out of school. They told their parents. Everybody got all upset. So they put the idea of a telephone system with phones in the classrooms to a vote, and the town overwhelmingly voted for it. So that's why they put that in.
It's a good way to justify it.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Not that I'm suggesting you should do that, but actually, and that brings it, one of the sort of historically speaking, when you talk about the IP network versus the phone network, the voice network, the different networks, they've been managed by different people in the business or school or whatever organization you happen to be talking about. So talk to me about the management of an IP phone system. How easy is it to, administer changes or other updates that you might need to make?
Right. So like a lot of technology these days, things have gotten much easier. Things are browser-based, and the opportunity is there to have a more intuitive interface, and phone systems are no exception. And there are some systems that are better than others. And the ability for somebody who's an untrained administrator in a school to be able to go in, we have new teachers, we have old teachers, I forgot my password and that kind of stuff, to do that day-to-day management of the system without actually going through more than maybe an hour or two's worth of training, for some schools is very important. Some schools have been paying a vendor every time somebody forgets a password or a new teacher comes in. They have to pay for all these adds, moves, and changes. The way we do it is we'll actually do those adds, moves, and changes as part of the maintenance contract. But our goal is to provide enough training so that a school administrator can manage the system for the routine changes on a day-to-day basis. And because it's browser-based and very intuitive, it's easy to do. And again, some systems are better than others, but the systems we use are typically very, very friendly. And again, that saves schools real dollars.
Is that a big deal? I mean, are there usually a lot of changes in school districts? Is it a very fluid environment, or?
So some schools interface to students. Again, if you talk about colleges and dorm rooms and things like that, it could be a big task on an annual basis. And again, some systems might interface with Active Directory, for example. So if somebody's going through and setting up the students through Active Directory for their campus account, if that can tie into the phone system at the same time, that creates a big management advantage.